Okay, this is November 17th. This is my first week with the piano, and I'm recording my first video musical diary entry. Um, and wait, there was one more thing. This is all things that I've realized today. I wrote this today. And I'm a bad piano player, so pardon. I always feel like a tourist on Wall Street. It's a bit like Times Square for me. I really like walking down that street. I was walking down Wall Street today, listening to Love Is Like Mud. Love Is Like Mud is a puppet show that I've been puppeteering in. And I'm forced to listen to these songs over and over, so I'll learn the words that I need to know, because my puppet will be singing them. It makes me think about how I have a total of 1 or 2 musicians that I listened to recently, over and over. Maybe a total of 4 or 5 songs. I get so charged listening to them, it makes me feel so guilty. Over and over, all I want to listen to day after day is the same one damn song. I think I should be reading now, or I should be doing nothing and being in the moment, even though I'm on the train and bored. And I say, okay, I'll put my headphones on shuffle. And I do. I press the fast forward button over and over until one of these songs come on. And with 2,000 songs, I just decide this is even more of a waste. And just indulge. So I got a call telling me the audition went well, and I got the part. And now I'm forced to listen to these songs over and over. And the music is really good. And I love listening to it. And I don't feel guilty, because I have to now. Ask, and you shall receive. All the while in my studio, I was seeing Andrew every single day. I was getting a little much, and I needed a little space. He got an email from his boss saying, "Hey Andrew, pack your stuff. We're going to Puerto Rico for a week for a bunch of photo shoots." Ask, and you shall receive. I'm going in a new direction with my own stuff. I want to make it smarter. With a purpose. Less meaningless clothing and more wearable objects. With an idea. This was a decision made this year. And this year I've met more successful artists than ever before. Ask, and you shall receive. I was just telling my unemployed, Hitler-obsessed, beer-guzzling roommate with a master's in Homeland Security named Dave something really similar. This month I made a few curtains for this restaurant in the West Village, a giant Sandman costume for this medicine company who wanted to promote their sleeping pill, and 20 hats for this performer party. For the Sandman I used my favorite fabric, this amazing boiled wool, which I've used before and was perfect for what they wanted. This was an expensive fabric, but was perfect for the job. Once I bought it, there was no fucking up. Otherwise it would be from my pocket. I called up the store to see if they had 6 yards of it. Hello, Elegant? You know that boiled wool stuff you have in the front that I bought 1,000,000 times in black and you always had before? Do you have 6 yards of that? Hold on, please. Smooth operator. Oh, hi! Oh, sorry. You remember me from before? Yeah, you know, I was asking for the black fabric. Oh, you're out? You have it in pink and black? I mean, in red and green, but not black? My heart skipped a few beats. And I peed a little. The only solution was to dye it. And dyeing was out of the question. Submerging it in water would make it shrink. And I couldn't just dye the whole thing and then cut it. Because this was 6 yards of really, really thick wool. And it would never fit in my dye bath. And it would come out uneven. And I needed 2-yard pieces cut. So if I just cut all 6 yards in half and dyed each 3-yard piece separately, I might have a cut in the middle of what I needed. Besides the fact that it is so hard to dye anything completely black. And wool dye, I know wool dye. It gets in the air. It's really potent and spills everywhere. I decided that dyeing was completely out of the question. What should I do? Dyeing was the only answer. I went to Aljo, my favorite dye spot, and talked to my favorite dye gal. This tiny woman answers the door, in size and shape. A tiny older stick woman with stick-straight brown hair, big round glasses, and a soft but stern voice. And what she was wearing, she wore a bright purple sweatshirt, and it was so tight, and it came to her waist. And she wore small purple sweatpants. But she was a dye master. I talked to her about what to do, and she said it will probably shrink. But what choice do you have? I bought 6 yards of the wool, and it came to $300. And then I went back to Aljo and bought a lot of dye. A 5-pound bag of salt, and went to work. I laid my pattern pieces on the fabric, saw how much I needed, and cut each piece. Oh well, it was a nightgown. If it shrunk, then it'll just have to be shorter. I dyed each pattern piece, which took 2 full days. The drying was the longest. After leaving each piece submerged for at least 2 hours, I would have to bring my boiling pot to the downstairs tub and pick up each piece out of the dye batch, which was hotter than the fucking sun. Wait for them to cool, rinse them, and wring them out. It took about an hour just for this. My bathtub looked like a slaughterhouse floor. The dye even reached the toilet and got all over the floor. It was impossible. When it was finally over, all the parts hung on my shower curtain bar, and the tub was deep stained purple. I took a picture because it reminded me of a murder scene. The medicine company wanted the design to be similar to the homeless newspaper guy. This is a dirty black homeless man in New York who cut strips of newspaper and ties them around his body and arms and legs. He looks enormous because of the strips, and it's really amazing to see. He even has a hat. Wait. He even has a hat. So I decided to use mop heads and put them all down the sleeve. I went to the hardware store and I bought 30 mop heads. And the hardware store guy said, "Why do you need all these mop heads? You're crazy, buy all these mop heads, why do you need them them all. And I said, I'm thinking of Sandman. I always have funny stories about gathering materials. One time I made a dress out of mouse traps, and I wanted them to all snap closed at the exact same time. And I had another conversation with another Chinese man, because I was trying to figure out, if I put these mouse traps flat, vertically instead of horizontally on the floor, and stand them up sort of in the air, how much pressure do I actually need from the back in order for them to snap? Because if they were against someone's body on a dress, how much do they have to lean against them for them to snap? And it was hard to explain this, but I think I got my point across. And he said, why you put the trap like that? It's supposed to be flat. And I said, no, 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 no. And I tried to explain it over and over, but he just wouldn't understand why I would put it flat, why I would put it vertical. And after a while, I gave up, and I realized he wouldn't get it. So I said, I have flying mice, and I just walked out. Another time I made a jacket out of cigarette butts. And I went to the projects to pick up smoked butts, because ghetto people smoke Newports. And I needed gold-tipped cigarettes. And there were 5 boys hanging outside the projects and watched me pick up the butts one by one for about 10 minutes as I was on my hands and knees, picking up the cigarettes one by one, dragging myself on the floor, and I could hear them whispering about me, and I could feel them staring until one boy asked, hey, you want a cigarette? No thanks, I don't smoke. Anyway, I took my mop heads and I rode home. And I went back to Aljo to get cotton dye and talked to my favorite tiny purple lady. And she said, how did it go? And I told her it went well with the wool, which was great. The pieces only shrank up a tiny bit and the color was a dark and scary swamp monster green. It was even better than a black. I picked up the dye and spent the next 2 days dyeing mop heads. And then I wrung them out one by one and hung them out to dry. And I sewed them on, made a mask, made a face covering, made a hat, made some gloves, made some feet, and he was complete. And they loved him. The hats job came after that. Oops. I had 5 days to make 20 hats. And they were these huge hats with flat circles with cutout shapes inside. But I used fauché to cover the head part and make the giant discs that sat on the head. I went to my favorite art supply store, New York Central Art Supply, to get the fauché. We only have 9 yards, not the 18 you need. And this was a really big deal, because all 20 hats had to be the exact same, and 9 yards wasn't nearly enough. And this was a product nobody had, and I nearly had a goddamn panic attack. Until I find out that someone else had it, the product. But instead of $12 a yard, it was $15 a yard. And they were in one-piece cutouts, not sewn together in full yardage. So I rushed over to the Complete Sculptor, and I waited 15 minutes with anticipation, while they had to get someone to see if they had it in the back. They did, and I got it. And I got in the fauché one by one, and I cut them out one by one, and now they needed to be spray painted. So I went back to my favorite hardware store and bought 18 cans of black matte spray paint. Why are you buying so much spray paint? You're crazy! What are you making I need another curtain job. So quick and so easy and so high-paying. And I delivered the hats on time, and they loved them. And I went to the party, and it was amazing. And the day after the party, I got an email from another restaurant. And I started saying they needed curtains. And I started another curtain job that week. Ask, and you shall receive.